So this week's Parsha, Vayishlach. Vayishlach means and he sent. Last week's Parsha ended off with Yakov leaving with his family, his wives and children, leaving Lavan. This week's Torah portion opens up with him heading towards, back where he came from, and Esav, his brother, who had wanted to kill him, which is why he left in the first place, is approaching him. So Vayishlach, Yakov, and Yakov sent these messengers ahead of him to greet Esav and to bring gifts to try to, appease him, etc. So that's where the story opens up. On the way along this journey, Yakov encounters a representative angel of Esav, and they get into a bit of a tussle, and Yakov actually is strong enough that the angel cannot beat him, cannot overpower him while they're wrestling. Yakov actually has the upper hand during that fight because the angel, is getting frustrated and sees that he's not winning. So if he doesn't have the power to completely overpower Yakov, it's going to at least try to do something. So the angel, slipped, I won't say an arm on a leg. I don't know exactly how it worked or what it looked like, but dislocated Yakov's hip and then damaged his presumably sciatic nerve, something like that. And to this day, we don't eat the sciatic nerve of an animal when we eat meat. Of mammals, we can't eat the sciatic nerve. Technically, it can be removed and then you could eat the hindquarters of the animal, but it's an extremely labor-intensive process to get out the whole nerve and all the parts that have to be taken out with it. And it's just not cost-effective, which is why there are some of the good cuts of meat that you can't really get kosher in almost all kosher butchers and meat stores because they come from the hindquarter of the animal, and it's just the amount they would have to charge per pound for that meat in order to justify someone spending all the time of removing all the parts of that nerve that have to be removed. It's just not worth it for them. So you don't really find it. So Yakov is wrestling with this angel. Yakov's got the upper hand. Now the angel wants to go. He's, the time that it was allotted to do this job of trying to go beat up Yakov is over. It says that the morning came and the angel says, you have to let me go. It's time for me to go. And Yakov says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. So the angel gives Yakov this blessing and says, your name will be changed from Yakov to Yisroel. It says, your name will be changed. No longer will you be called Yakov. Rather, you will be called Yisroel. Right? And so we are, the Jewish people are generally referred to as Bnei Yisroel, the sons of Yisroel. Yisroel being Yakov, the sons of Yakov. Now, there's something very interesting here that is discussed in the Gemara. When Avram Avinu had a very similar story, when Avram was told that your name will no longer be Avram, your name will be Avraham. So it says your name will be Avraham, you will no longer be called Avram. And there is actually a prohibition, it is halachically prohibited to refer to Avraham as Avram. Because it says your name will not be Avram, it will be Avraham. So you can't refer to him as Avram. The Pasuk says it's not Avram anymore. We have a almost identical statement about Yakov, yet somehow we still refer to Yakov as Yakov all the time. So what's up with that? And the answer, at least the first stage of the answer, is very simple and technical. If you look in the Torah, after Yaakov's name is changed to Yisroel, the Torah continues to refer to him with both names. The Torah continues to refer to him as both Yisroel and to use the name Yaakov, which is a clear indication of the fact that when it said, your name will no longer be Yaakov, it will be Yisroel, it meant, let's say, it will no longer be only Yaakov, or your primary name will no longer be Yaakov, whatever it is. But when it said, it will be Yaakov, not Yisroel, it will be Yisroel, not Yaakov. It didn't mean you're not allowed to use this name, clearly, because the Torah continues to use it. Whereas here, once Abraham's name is changed from Avram to Avraham, the Torah never uses this name again. So then lends to us taking it literally at face value when it says your name will no longer be called Avram. That means we're not allowed to call him that anymore. Okay, so technically we understand why we're allowed to refer to Yakov as Yakov. We're not allowed to refer to Abraham as Avram. We've got a source to back it up, but what's the reason? Right? There's got to be a reason why. When it says your name will no longer be Avram, it will be Abraham, we're not allowed to use this name, but when it says almost the same thing, your name will not be Yakov, it will be Yisroel, well, let me take a step back. Let me put that a bit differently. There's going to be a reason why after the Torah says your name will no longer be Avram, it will be Abraham, it never uses this name again. But when it says your name will no longer be Yakov, it will be Yisroel, it does continue to use this name. And the difference is in the messages that all of these names carry. So the change in names comes with a message that relates to the meaning of the various names. So there is a message, a meaning that's carried by the name Avram, and then there's a very different message that's carried by the name Avraham. And the hey was added in to change the meaning of the word, and once the meaning changed to Avraham, the prior meaning of the word Avram was history. We got an upgrade, and the message that this name carries is the message presently, and that was an old message, but we're not there anymore. Whereas the message of Yakov and the message of the name Yisroel are very different, and to some degree they're almost kind of opposites, and we'll get to that. But they do both still have a place. They had a place for Yakov, and they both have a place for each of us. And so because both names, and in a sense this is also an upgrade, which we'll see, but the fact that the let's say Yakov was upgraded from the meaning of Yakov to the meaning of Yisroel doesn't mean that the prior meaning of Yakov is history anymore. Is history and we don't use it anymore. It's not the case at all. In very brief, without getting too much into detail, because it's really not the topic, but it's a beautiful idea. The name Avram means father who is elevated, exalted. And the idea of Avram is someone who is, someone who's in the ivory tower, someone who's too good for, all the plebs. He's just someone who's elevated and on their own level and in their own place and doesn't really relate to or get all those regular people and all that regular stuff down there. Now think about if you would have two people walk into a room, let's say, and two people walk into this room, or whatever, and one of them is trying to explain an idea in some sort of, let's say, academic topic that none of us here have any expertise in and much familiarity at all, and this person's, like a career professor of this field and knows just about everything there is to know about it, and they come in and they decide they're going to explain it to us, and they start talking about it and using all these big words, and all of us have just completely lost in tune out within 10 seconds because we have no idea what the guy's talking about. We can respect the fact that clearly this person is very smart, but got no idea what's going on. And then a contemporary, another professor in the same field, walks in afterwards to try to explain the same thing and stops and takes a minute to think and then starts teaching or explaining the exact same material but manages to explain it in a way that all of us can understand it. Now, at first glance, the first professor or teacher might sound more smart because they're using lots of big words and saying things that most people don't understand, and it does sound and feel really smart. But which one of those two actually clearly has a deeper grasp of the material? The second one, clearly, because their grasp allows them to be flexible with the way that they present it and to be able to work with the ideas so that they can find a metaphor, find a different choice of words, find ways to present it to make it accessible to more people. So while the first one sounds and presents as more intelligent, it's clearly the second one who actually has a much deeper connection to this material and a much deeper understanding. And so what happens here is Avram is this exalted father, And then when the name Hey represents Hashem, divinity, the infinity of the Creator, when that's added into his name, it now becomes a kind of acronym of sorts for Av Hamoin Goyim, the father of all the people. So here he went from, Avram Avinu went from being this exalted, super high, elevated figure to being someone who was able to relate to and interact with everyone and have a connection with everyone. Now, while at face value that might seem like a downgrade, from being like someone super high and elevated and special and unique to being someone who can just walk among the regular people, it's not a downgrade at all. That's an enormous upgrade. He didn't lose anything. The upgrade was such that he was no longer limited to being stuck in his little bubble in his little ivory tower. He could take everything that he already had and bring it and share it, because he was no longer had those limitations that kept him stuck all the way up there before. And once you get that upgrade that allows you to be able to have everything you had before, but to share it and to bring it to the world, this is, we don't need that anymore. There's no need to have this isolated ivory tower version if there's another equivalent that's available that has everything that that one has, and it has it with a depth and infinity that allows it to be shared and to be made available and to be brought to the people. So once Avraham got upgraded from Avram to Avraham, this name's out. We don't use this anymore. We're not even allowed to refer to him with that name. However, here with Yaakov, these two names, it's also an upgrade in terms of, let's say, what it is, the way it shows up. But in terms of the real, the purpose and the real meaning beneath the surface, in some ways, the pre-upgraded version is actually the more deeply valuable one. And so that's why there's going to be a place for both. So even though this is an upgrade, Yisroel is an upgrade over Yakov, both names are still in play. And that's why the Torah continues to refer to him as Yaakov, and we're allowed to continue to refer to him as Yaakov. So what do these names represent? One of the things that the name Yaakov refers to is deceit. Trickery. Deceit is probably the right word. And what it refers to is the way that he got the blessings. Right? So his father Yitzchak called in his older twin brother Esav, who was the firstborn, who should have been entitled to the blessings, to the first and greater blessings that Yitzchak was giving, towards the end of his life. And instead of coming and just telling Yitzchak, by the way, Esav's not what you think, and really the blessings are supposed to go to Yakov and his mother, Rivka, did this whole elaborate scheme, and they literally, they scammed Yitzchak. They misled Yitzchak and scammed him. Now, technically, they didn't do anything wrong, because the blessings were supposed to go to Yakov. Esav had sold them to him for a pot of soup. But at the end of the day, they didn't come and do it straight. And they did that to protect Yitzchak, because he would have been devastated. So they did do it to protect Yitzchak, but at the end of the day, it was very deceptive. Yaakov dressed up without technically lying. He misrepresented himself as being Esav. And Rivka went and quickly cooked food. She took, she had her livestock that she was entitled to as part of the marriage arrangement. So she took some of her livestock and prepared it. And Yaakov brought it into Yitzchak as though he was Esav and had prepared this food for him. And so then Yitzchak, who was blind, gave him these blessings. So Yaakov came by these blessings, even though they were his, he was entitled to them, but he didn't just come out and say it how it was. It was very deceptive. He presented as one thing when the truth was completely different. And so the name Yaakov refers to deceit. the name Yisroel refers to a few things. One of them is straightness, doing things straight out in the open, the opposite of deceit. The context in which we're going to be talking about this is the way that we interact with the world around us. And the world around us doesn't just mean there. It means with the things that are important to our life every day, and perhaps we could say with parts of ourselves as well. And that is the idea of engaging with the world with a deeper intent behind the scenes that's very different to the intent at face value. And this is something that we've talked about several times already. The general idea. And that could be that a person, goes to work, it builds a big business because they want to accumulate wealth. And maybe it's not because they want to accumulate wealth because they want to give it all to charity. Because that's a little too on the nose. That's not a very good deceit, let's say. But maybe, I think this is not only a very realistic possibility, I think that there are very many people like this. There are people who, for whatever reason, as a result of whatever factors contributed towards this, when they show up to the world as an adult, there is a deep sense that they have inside that it is important for them to be wealthy. For some people, it might be that their self-image is attached to that. It might be, their self-esteem. It might be a fear of not having enough, whatever it is. And a person can show up and pursue wealth because they want to be wealthy, not because they want to give it all to charity. But that can show up in two different ways. You could have a person who says, I want to be wealthy. I'm just materialistic. I love stuff. I love money. I love status. That's what I want. Now we can have a subtly but profoundly different variation of that, which is a person who lives to fulfill their purpose, lives to execute on Hashem's desire, on why we're here, to make the world a dwelling place for Hashem, to uplift the world, to bring godliness into the world. And this person also is not afraid to be brutally honest and to say, look, the bottom line is, for whatever reason, I feel driven to be wealthy. I feel a let's call it even a need of sorts to be wealthy. And as long as I don't have that, I'm not going to feel right. So I could fight that and be fighting it the whole time. Or if I can have the courage to say, you know what, in terms of my values, I don't think that being materialistic is an utmost value, but there's also something in me that has a very deep sense of need to be wealthy. And so I am going to set up my life in a way that I can serve Hashem and pursue wealth, and that is going to allow me to feel fulfilled. It's going to allow me to feel myself and to be able to be present, because I'm not denying myself something that maybe I even feel like I wish I didn't, but the bottom line is I do. And so I am going to pursue that and do it in a perfectly legit, kosher way, everything according to halacha, and do everything right. But this is going to be a big focus of my life, because at the end of the day, I feel like I need it. And if I'm being honest and realistic, if I don't pursue that, everything else is not going to be right because I'm going to be denying myself something that I feel like I really need. And if I can allow myself to have that, at the end of the day, the reality is I will show up to the world, to shul, to Torah, to mitzvahs, to my family, to my community, to Hashem, in a much more present and invested and grounded way because I feel my needs have been met. The same way that, a person who literally is hungry because they haven't had food is not going to be able to show up in the same way that they would if they weren't hungry. For a person for whom this is a hunger of sorts, yes, it's true that there is an approach and, it has a place to say, well, maybe we could, do some investigating and do some semantic inquiry maybe and see where's this need coming from and why do you have it? And maybe by discovering where that comes from and not addressing where it comes from in order to solve it, but if there's something inside that is not quite right, which is the cause of this, and we can resolve that so that it will be right, and as a result, this might go away, amazing. But not everybody's up to that. It's whatever it is. It's a very reasonable approach that a person's going to say, look, if I don't do this, I'm going to be hungry the whole time. I'm not going to be able to show up. So I'm going to allow myself this, and I'm going to be able to show up. So this person, when they go into a business negotiation, when they buy something or sell something or whatever it is, and they're producing wealth, they're not in that meeting thinking, oh yes, okay, I'm going to make stacks of cash today and then I'm going to go give a ton of charity. No. That person is thinking, I'm going to make stacks of cash today, my bank account's going to grow, I'm going to be feeling content, healthy, safe, satisfied, whatever the need is beneath that, because this is just the way that I'm wired. For whatever reason or combination of reasons. But at the end of the, so that person is pursuing wealth to pursue wealth, not to give charity. But if that person is pursuing wealth to pursue wealth because they know that this is, at the end of the day, realistically, this is the way that is going to work for them to show up and do all the things they're supposed to do in the most present and invested and connected way, then they're pursuing wealth, not for charity, but to become wealthy. But there is also beneath that the purpose of doing what I'm here for, which is to bring Hashem into the world, to elevate the world, to do Torah mitzvahs. And for whatever reason, this is going to allow me to do that. So here, unlike the person who is going to make money to give it all to charity, where there it's like, straight up everybody knows, okay, this guy signed a big deal, he's going to go and, whatever, give a huge amount of money to charity. It's very clear. Here, it's much more deceptive. The person is pursuing wealth because they want to be wealthy, but that also has beneath it the real reason that they've decided to do that is because they know or they accept, they understand that this is going to serve their ultimate purpose, which is to bring godliness into the world. The person who goes and says, you know what, I got my enough sleep, I got 8 hours of sleep every night this week, but for some reason I just really feel like I could use a rest. I'm just going to go sit down and put my feet up for a few minutes. Or, and I'm going to do that because I'm going to feel good if I do that. Very simple. It might not be because then I'm going to be able to perform better for the rest of the day and da-da-da-da-da. It might just be I'm going to feel good. The reality is that there is extraordinary complexity when it comes to the interactions and the landscape of feeling good and health and being in a state of, let's say, not just technical health that you could measure with a blood test, but wellness and well-being. And a person could say, you know what, like, I think it's important for me to start taking care of myself a little better. And if I just feel like, you know what, I just want to go sitting with my feet up because I'm going to enjoy it. That can come from, again, from two different places. It can come from that place of the person who says, you know what, I feel like it's the right thing to take care of myself a little better. And so I feel like doing that, I'm going to go do it. Not I'm going to go do that because then I'm going to perform better for the rest of the day. Again, that's like making the money to give to charity. I feel like I'm going to enjoy it. But if behind that is, I feel like taking care of myself a little better is the right thing to do, so I'm going to sit down on the couch because I'm going to enjoy it, but the reason that I'm doing it to enjoy it is because I understand that taking care of myself a little better is the right thing to do. Same thing could, now you could have something that looks very similar, which is someone that's just like, oh, you know what? I feel like lying down. I've got 100 things to do. Scrap it. I'm just going to go lie down with my feet up. Why? Because I feel like it. Without any intent beneath the surface, without any sort of meaning or deeper purpose behind it. Again, they look very similar. They sound very similar, at least in terms of the actual words. They're both, you know what? I'm going to go sit on the couch with my feet up because I feel like it, because I'm going to enjoy it. But they're also very different things. And the reality is you'll feel the difference in their body language and in the voice when a person says it, in their attitude, in their energy. But they both present more or less the same, but one of them is deceptive because the real purpose is very different and in a sense almost opposite to what the purpose is that we see. And that's what deceit is. Deceit is when you present something. Deceit doesn't just mean lying or wearing a mask. Or deceit can be a lot deeper than that. It can be a lot more subtle. It can be presenting. It could even be, technically speaking, if you do something that someone else is going to benefit from, if I do something that someone else is going to benefit from and I'm going to benefit from it too, and I present it as though I'm doing it as a favor for them, but really the reason I'm doing the favor is my own personal gain, that's deceptive. I lied. Now, yes, it's a favor for them and they're going to benefit from it, and I'm not scamming them or ripping them off, but I misrepresented reality. That's deceptive. So Yakov represents this idea of interacting with the world deceptively, of doing the things we're supposed to do, interacting with the world on its terms to a degree, but with a deeper purpose behind the scenes. Yisroel refers to doing things straight up. You do it, it is what it is, and there's nothing here that's behind the scenes. And what an example of this would be, let's say, if a person is just, you know what, that food looks so good, I'm going to eat it because I feel like it, and that's it, and there's nothing else beneath the surface. That's, let's say, it's self-serving, it's materialistic, but they're going to make a bracha and it's kosher and they're going to do all the right things. There's nothing halachically wrong with it. It's not, let's say, the ideal state of being and living. As opposed to the person who says, you know what, that looks really good, I'm going to enjoy it. And, parenthetically, I feel like just taking a bit better care of myself is the right thing to do. And they don't say that, but that's behind the scenes. So that would be the Yakov approach. On Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to enjoy sensory pleasure on Shabbos. There's a mitzvah to enjoy good food on Shabbos. So when you come to the Shabbos table and you say, that looks delicious, I'm going to enjoy it, and there's nothing else involved, there's no deeper purpose, you just did a mitzvah. Because there's a mitzvah to enjoy the sensory pleasure of good food on Shabbos. There's a mitzvah to rest on Shabbos. So when you say, you know what, I'm going to go pass out on my bed, I just feel like it, and you go and do that, and there's nothing deeper beneath the surface, you just did a mitzvah.
Can I clarify? So when we use the name Yakov, so that's what you just said, to enjoy the materialistic things, but elevated?
No, that's Yisroel. Yisroel is, now for most of us this is not reality. We get a taste of it on Shabbos. On Shabbos you can be materialistic and rock up to the table and say, that looks amazing. And you did a mitzvah.
On Shabbos though.
Yes, only on Shabbos.
Yakov.
Yes. Now for a tzaddik, for someone who doesn't have any, let's say, let's say a colloquial way of putting it, for someone who doesn't have a materialistic bone in their body, They don't have to have the intention that I'm doing this because I decided that taking care of myself is the right thing to do. If they just like show up and say, that looks really good, I'm going to have it, it's straight positive. Like there's nothing about this person that could be anything other than that. So there's no need to have anything behind the scenes. This is a person who, whatever they do, it's clearly divine. So they could do that Shabbos approach every day of the week and it would be fine, hypothetically. Right now there are not many people like this, obviously, but this is the idea.
Hi, I'm Gemini.
So I was trying to think of like a smart response, but I didn't come up with anything. That was that pause. So what does this have to do with us? It's not just about the weekdays and Shabbos. Right? So just backing up 1 second. We see that Yisroel, to be in a state in which you can just show up and enjoy the food because you feel like it, and that is automatically divine, as opposed to having to have something behind the scenes, that is clearly a big upgrade. For a person to be in that state in which their materialism is divine automatically is an enormous upgrade. But that's not really where the magic happens. The person who is so not materialistic that even their materialism is divine, that's represented by the name Yisroel. There's a pasuk that says, Lo hibit oven b'Yakov v'lo ra amol b'Yisrael. Hashem, God, doesn't see sins with Yakov and doesn't see Amal work with Yisroel. Yakov represents someone who's doing the right thing, but it's work. It's a constant job. It's constant maintenance, constant effort. Yisroel, lo ra amal b'Yisrael. Yisroel, there's no work. This is someone who, they are so anti-materialistic or just a-materialistic that they could engage in materialistic behavior and it's still going to be divine. They don't have to try hard. They don't have to put in any effort. That's amazing. Now, which one of those is the one that's really making change in the world? Which is the one that's achieving, that's producing growth and change? It's the one that's doing the work. Someone who, has materialism in their nature and does the work of maintaining those core values beneath the surface that allow them to engage in that materialism for the right reason behind the scenes, that is a very, very deep transformation or elevation. That person has taken not just the money, because the person who makes a lot of money and gives it to charity, they've elevated the money and the work they did to do the money itself. This other person has elevated materialism itself. They have elevated the pursuit of wealth. And in a sense, they've almost elevated a somewhat self-centered pursuit of wealth because they're doing it for the right reason behind the scenes. That's a much deeper transformation, a much deeper integration of divinity into the world. Much deeper. They're also elevating the money and the work, but they're elevating materialism itself. Hashem created a world with mundane, tangible, and even, let's say, negative and borderline negative or seemingly negative things. Everything Hashem created was created to be a part of this integration and elevation. Now, there are some things that the role they play is to stay on the other side of the line, non-kosher food, and there is it's a very complex thing to really break down all the details because it gets messy with choice and design and etc. But in a sense, there is a beauty to, right, the Gemara and the Rambam, and there are different variations of the same idea, but it says that b'makom shabal tshuva omdim, the place where someone who did teshuvah stands, a perfect tzaddik could never stand. And one of the reasons is the person who ate non-kosher food and then learns or becomes inspired to make a change, and that passion that they have is just on fire because of where they're coming from and the passion they feel to shift and to move away from that towards something else, they have a passion that doesn't show up without that baggage. That is a passion you only see in the presence of that baggage, let's call it. Which means that when that person gets that passion and makes that shift, they have now, in a sense, elevated and integrated godliness even into the baggage that you're not allowed to integrate it into. There is no way that you are halachically allowed to integrate godliness into non-kosher food. But for the person who has that history, and whether it's because they didn't know or because they were never inspired or they were taught in a way that made them feel disconnected or they were hurt or whatever it was, and that's where they were, and then they make that shift, that person is doing the impossible. They are integrating godliness into something that is officially non-integratable. There's a depth of integration here that is, it's not even counterintuitive, it's against the rules and it's technically impossible. Which means that it's incomparably more valuable. Now, where does that leave the person who doesn't have that baggage and therefore misses out? Sorry? Sucks to be them. Right, no, but the Rebbe talks about it and says, you know what? They can go and find other people and help them make the shift, and then they have a part in that. They have a share in that shifting, in the elevation of that baggage. So if a person wants to have a part in that, it doesn't mean they should go out and do those things and then turn around. That's not the way this works. But they can find other people and help them make the shift. Is there a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. So, like, I thought to Bali Chiva, we have this tendency to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and, like, completely remove our past, whatever. We have no past. But the idea that you're expressing is that we don't have to get rid of what brought us here, not only for the fact that it brought us here and helped us survive and get to the point where we are walking in Hashem's path, but we can also use that to serve Hashem in an even greater way.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. Now, there is an equivalent of that applies to everybody. It's just more overt here. Yes, 1,000%. And honestly, I think, and this is something that I've been like thinking about a lot lately, I'm very passionate about. I think that a lot of people, I am very confident, I'm certain, that a lot of people, yes, Baal Tshuva, no Baal Tshuva, feel parts of themselves that they're a little bit afraid of because it feels a little bit outside the box, and it's like, When we all know and profess and talk about the fact that Hashem created each one of us unique so that we could each bring our own flavor, but then when it comes time to actually bringing our own flavor to the table, it's like, well, nobody else is doing that, so maybe it's not really right. It's like, well, the fact that everybody is afraid doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. It's like, I guess it's, just because I'm using the word flavor, this idea that popped into my head. It's like, if someone's going to a potluck Shabbos meal and, they're Moroccan and there's going to be like 50, like Ashkenazis, 50 people who like came from Poland and Germany and they're the one Moroccan, and they have something to offer that has so much more flavor, but they know that all of these, white people are going to be like, oh my goodness, what's that? So they don't bring it. When if those people would actually have the courage to just have a taste, they'd be like, wow, that's interesting, that's complex, this is like really rich. But no one else is bringing anything that looks like that. No one else is bringing anything that has that much color and that much aroma and that depth of flavor and complexity. So it's just like, whoa, no one's doing that, I'm going to stay over here. Right? But we all know that Hashem created us unique to bring that flavor. Now, in a sense, this is something that a person who has, let's say, a broader history, it just means that they're more likely to have dabbled and to have discovered and expressed those things, which means they're more likely to be aware. Whereas someone who grew up in a box their whole life might have to do some real work to even figure out, like, what is that flavor? I haven't had any room to to show or express flavor for the entire 20, 30, 40, 50 years of my life. So I didn't even know what it is, and it can be like real work just to figure out what that is, right? So that again, you're seeing there's that advantage and that beauty that a person, and we're all supposed to do that. It's scary because it's inconsistent and it's variation and everyone's different, but that's literally the whole point of the variation, is for it to be brought into the world. Right? So yes, 100% there's that. And I just want to clarify that it is very understandable, this tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because unlike the metaphor, oh, God forbid, it's first of all, the line between the flavor and then the way that that flavor showed up and was expressed, which we do want to try to leave behind, it's blurry. It's not like, the baby and the bathwater, it's night and day. They're two different things. One is human flesh and person, and one is water. This is not the case here, right? So the lines get much more blurred and it can become more complex. And also, there can be it can be difficult to go back to something when you have associations with things that now you see as very negative that you want to stay distant from. And for some people, it might be the right thing to say, you know what, I know that that's in me and it would be nice to bring it out, but I can't go there right now. Maybe one day, but I'm not ready. Like I'm not in a position where I have the capacity and the bandwidth to re-engage in that without it taking me somewhere that I don't want to go. So I'm not going there. That's a very real thing too. It's not like, yes, you have to go find your thing and just dive in head first. But to the extent that people can do that safely and securely, the more the better. That's why it's there. Hashem didn't create every single person completely different so that we could just all show up exactly the same. It's like, what a waste of creative effort. So yes, absolutely. What you said is 100% right. So the fear is understandable the same way that the fear of the FFBs is understandable. They're both wrong. Now, no, I wouldn't say they're both wrong. What I would say is both of them can result in behavior or in showing up in a way that's not ideal, and working on the courage to engage with it, even though it's a little different and it's not like everyone else. But if we know that it's the right thing to do and we can have the courage to do it, or maybe it's very different to what I'm used to and what's comfortable or whatever it is, that courage can allow us to really step into why we're here. Not the common reason why all of us are here together, but the reason why Hashem bothered to bring me, you, each of us ourselves. We can step into that if we have the courage to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to shine. I'm going to find those parts inside of me that are not the same as everyone else. And I'm going to have the courage to step into that completely and to bring it into the world and allow it to show up for Hashem and for the world and for Dir B'Tachtonim with all of that. And I just think it's a matter of, there are some people who do it. A lot of people don't, but I think the more that people do it, the easier it'll become for more and more people to do it. And we all agree, we all know, and we can all give a speech and explain that that's obviously the case. But to actually show up that way and to believe it, have the courage to believe it all the way down here, it's scary. It's a whole different ballgame. So, okay. So now, even though, yes, obviously it's an upgrade to be so non-materialistic that even your materialism is just clearly, obviously divine, that is larger and superior, let's say. It's a superior level or state of being. But the depth of integration and the fulfillment of the purpose of existence is incomparably greater and deeper when the person can be materialistic, actually materialistic, and have that deceptive purpose behind it, which is, I'm doing this because this is a need that I have and it's going to allow me to show up for Hashem properly, with a proper connection and fulfillment. And at the end of the day, I'm going to show up better that way. Now, if this is the case, and let's say that I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that all of us are more Yakov than Yisroel, like what's the whole Yisroel? Like, why is that relevant to us? Why does the Torah need to tell us that his name changed to Yisroel? It's not just because it's a historical fact, because the word Torah means teaching, hora'ah, instruction. The Torah doesn't give us any historical data just for the sake of historical data. Every word that's in Torah is there as instruction. So what is the message for this upgrade to Yisroel, to this state of being so non-materialistic that even materialism is clearly divinity? What relevance does that have to any of us, regular folks? And the answer is that beneath the surface, and by beneath the surface, I don't mean behind a mask. I don't mean behind something that we've adopted that's fake or wrong. I mean beneath who we are, for real. Every one of us has a unique body, has different genes, has different metabolism, a different physiology, a different personality, a different mind, a different emotional profile. So all of these are parts of us, our body, our mind, our heart, our emotions, our thoughts, our experience, our intellect. All of these are parts of who we are. All of these contribute to our personality, to our character, etc. But beneath all of that, the real true you, the real true me that is behind all of that is Yisroel, is straight up divinity. So all of us do have this. This is relevant to every one of us. This is who every single one of us is beneath the surface. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, okay, so let's just like tear off all of those layers and just get to that. Because first of all, that's not a possibility. It's not designed that way. We can't just like tear through stuff. It's designed and it's a structure that exists and is not reversible or removable. We can't, if a person hypothetically would do that, that would ultimately boil down to them not being a person anymore. That's what that would look like, because a person is all of those things. But even that person who has this, let's say, deeply behind the scenes intentional pursuit of materialism, on Shabbos, they can show up and eat that challah or salad or steak or cholent or whatever it is just because it looks good, no strings attached, and that is divinity right there. Right? Now, 6 days of the week are not Shabbos. The vast majority of the week is not Shabbos. Right? Let's say 85% or so is weekdays, when our approach is one of deceit, where we want to show up. And in a sense, I think that there's the message here, maybe for a lot of us, really, I mean, the message is what it is, but maybe for a lot of us, the message that my guess is that probably for most people who are learning this or listening or hearing this, the real message is the opposite of what a lot of people will take it at face value, which is that beneath the surface of that materialism, there has to be a purpose. But that also tells us that if beneath the surface is your purpose, then you don't need to be afraid to be who you are. And if there's something that you need to feel complete and to show up in the world, and it's something that is halachically acceptable and it's fine, and at the end of the day, if you allow yourself that, you will feel more healthy, you will feel more well, you will feel better motivated and driven, and you will show up in the world better at the end of the day, then that is exactly what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to be deceiving the world. Now, deceiving has two parts. One way of presenting it is that whatever you have at face value, there's something else behind the scenes. Right now, when a person wants to deceive, what do they really do? It goes in the opposite direction. Okay, there's something that I have an agenda here. What can I use to dress up the agenda? If the Torah is telling us that even after he upgraded to Yisroel, to everything at face value, the name Yakov is still here because the depth of integration, when there is this deceit, there are these multiple layers, is far greater and more valuable and richer and more beautiful and meaningful. then if we know what that real objective is, what the purpose is, then that Yakov, the name of Yakov, is telling us, if you are anchored in that purpose, then don't be afraid to add a layer of deceit on top. If you have that purpose of, I am here to elevate the world, I am here to live a life according to Torah and mitzvahs, the way that the Creator has instructed us to, and to bring divinity into the world, that's my purpose for everything I do. And then in order to do that fully, I am a human being, as much as we all, perhaps, or many of us might think that, I wish I didn't, care so much about food or about fashion or whatever it is that I'm really into. Hypothetically, Yisroel isn't into any of that stuff. And that's why Yisroel can engage in that stuff when it's all straight divinity. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We're all Yakov people. Which means that there are parts of us that want those things. There are parts of us that are going to feel more fulfilled. Every one of us has something unique and special that we have a drive for, that we have a passion for, that is our flavor, and that when we live true to Torah and mitzvahs with that flavor, we are going to show up in a whole different way. We're going to be passionate. We're going to be sharing. We're going to be on fire, full steam ahead. Why? Because we are in our element. Now, yes, part of our element is the deeper element behind the scenes, but we're talking about someone who's grounded in that already. But as the human being, we are, at the end of the day, like it or lump it, we're human beings, and we will be more in our element when we show up the way that Hashem designed us to show up. When we express the things that Hashem put inside of us, assuming that they're things that can be expressed in a halachically permissible way. So if we ground it in that, then let's do Yakov, let's deceive the world, and let's layer our personality on top of that. Let's embrace who we are. Let's embrace the things that make us feel alive. Let's embrace the things that get us on fire. Let's embrace the things that make us feel connected and fulfilled and grounded and that make us want to share and express and do and step into the world. That's what the name Yaakov's telling us. And the name Yaakov, relative to Shabbos, is 85% of the time. Now, yes, every week we do have to have a Shabbos. It's very easy for a person to start out in the right place and say, okay, all of these parts of my personality, I'm going to embrace them and engage them and all of that, and then just get totally lost in that and forget about the grounding. So every week we have Shabbos. We have that time to plug into Yisroel, to plug into that straight, unadulterated divinity, to spend time. What do we do on Shabbos? We spend time connecting to and focusing on our primary values. Spending time with family, with friends, with community around a Shabbos table, talking about our values, discussing Torah, discussing why we're here. So we have that grounding, and every day we start out the day, acknowledging God, acknowledging the fact that we're here for a reason. Davening, praying, connecting, plugging in. It's extremely important to do that because we can embrace the beauty of our uniqueness and our passions and the thing that make us feel alive and on fire. And if we do that but forget about the grounding that we had before, we could end up in a worse place than being stuck in the purpose and not embracing ourselves. Worse in a lot of ways. I mean, there's always complexity, but so we do have to have both. And the reason we're able to do both is because every one of us is Yisroel. Yisroel and Yakov is the same person. It's two names for the same person that refer to two things in that person. Every one of us, deep down inside, that is who we are. Pure, unadulterated, unadulteratable divinity. And at the level of that divinity that is who we really are in the deepest place inside of ourselves, enjoying the food because it tastes good is divinity, because there is nothing but divinity here. So within every one of us, there is that place where there is nothing but divinity, which means that we have that anchor inside, and as long as we hold on to that, and that is behind the scenes and beneath the surface of the Yakov, of the embracing who we are as a human being and our personality and our interests and desires, our passions, etc., the ways that we are going to want to and feel good to show up in the world, if we have that Yisroel deep down inside and we retain that connection to that, and then we do the Yakov, that's the whole point. The point is Yakov more than Yisroel. Yes, Yisroel is a superior level in terms of, the empirical value of it, of how godly it is, or however you want to put it. But the real depth of meaning and purpose is in the Yakov. So every one of us is supposed to do both, and that's why the Torah continues to use both names even after the name is changed. Even once we connect and tap into that, I have a purpose, I am pure divinity deep down inside, the Torah still says Yakov, 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 Yakov. Don't forget that, yes, you must stay connected and anchored to that and anchored to your purpose, but layer the person that you are on top of that. Show up in the world as Yakov. Deceive the world. Show up and share who you are with the world, and let the world see and feel and get from what you have to share. Share Torah and mitzvahs and the beauty of Hashem and divinity with your personality and enjoy it. Be Yaakov with that purpose behind the scenes. And that's the whole point. And that's why the Torah continues to use the name Yaakov, because we are supposed to deceive the world. Which means that we're supposed to engage with the world with this purpose behind, or on top of that purpose, we are supposed to engage with the world as who we are. Not, I'm just doing it in order to give charity. Now, that's a very specific example. It's not like everybody should go and pursue wealth for the sake of wealth. But everyone should do that equivalent thing for themselves. The person who wants to go paint and that's what makes them feel alive, find a way to do that and bring positivity and beauty into the world. Even if it's just beauty and joy. Joy is a good thing. It's a mitzvah to make people happy. And if you can put some meaning in there, even better. But to say, well, no, that's like, out of the box. Not everybody does that, so I'm not going to do that. It's like that's taking something that Hashem created and invested in and just chucking it in the garbage. And if a person likes dancing or singing or whatever it is, these are some very just expressive, outgoing variations. But for the person who likes to sit quietly and just, interact with one person at a time and go really deep and get a really deep connection, and that's what they feel, how they feel alive, and then go and do that and share with people in a deep way. Whatever it is, it can be introverted, it can be outgoing, but we're supposed to be Yaakov. There is supposed to be a layer of human being on top of that. And that's supposed to be 6 out of the 7 days. That's supposed to be the bulk of who we are. Yes, we have to make sure that we are actively retaining that anchor to the purpose on an ongoing basis. Every week on Shabbos, every day in the morning, throughout the day, etc. But at the end of the day, the bulk of it is the Yaakov. It's the showing up with a person on top of that. Have a good week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.